Welcome to the Brown Girl Rising podcast. I'm your host, Urvashi, and I'm so happy to have you here. We are here to celebrate you and incredible, inspirational women of colour from around the world. Women who are breaking down cultural barriers, who are smashing through glass ceilings, and women who have experienced trauma and challenges and risen from these challenges. I'm so excited, so let's dive in. Hi guys, welcome to the Brown Girl Rising podcast. This is your host Ush, and today I have a very special guest, Juspreet the Menstrual Mentor. Juspreet helps women understand and use their monthly cycles as a form of fertility awareness and as a way to help them either get pregnant or not. Understanding your cycle is a form of contraception, and we'll go into that a little bit shortly, and the cycle in this podcast. But Juspreet is definitely a brown girl rising, and she is making waves not only in the lives of the women she works with, but also by getting the conversation going around sexual health, periods, and contraception, something us girls have been shamed for a long, long time. And it's now coming out in the open because of the conversations she is having. And I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, Juspreet. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me. That's such a nice intro. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited that you're here too. So look, Juspreet, before we jump in, the first question I ask all my guests is, what does it mean to you to be unlimited?
It's such a good question. I literally love that question. To be unlimited, like really simply, is to just get out of my own way.
Yeah.
Getting out of my own way and stopping that inner chatter of the brain and just going for what I want to go for. That's what it means to me to be unlimited.
I love that. And I have to say, you are a total embodiment of that, right? You've just gone for what you believe in, and we'll go into how you became who you are, but you've created this entire business from something that you experienced yourself. So if it's okay with you, can you take us through how you went from, not being a menstrual mentor to becoming a menstrual mentor, and what the journey was, I guess?
Yeah. For sure. So when I was young, and I'm sure a lot of you listening will relate to this, sexual health, periods, we don't learn about it. Sex education in the UK is crap. And that's not, the teacher's fault. It's nothing like that. It's just, a lot of people go to school, go to university to become a maths teacher or become a history teacher, and they will train in that. There's no option to go to school to become a sex education teacher. So it's just kind of lumped on teachers, right? So the system in that way, like in many different ways, is broken, right? So it's not any individual's fault, but we don't learn about it. We don't learn about sex education in an intentional or meaningful way. It's rooted in shame. And that goes the same for periods, right? It's rooted in shame. We're not supposed to talk about it in this country. And when we do talk about it, it's just very surface level. You're going to bleed. This is going to happen. Use a pad, use a tampon. This is what a condom looks like. Those are the kind of broad things that I remember learning. And a lot of other people that I've spoken to, a lot of my clients as well, they remember the same kind of thing from school. So that was that. Grew up not really having a clue about my cycle, to be honest. And then, it's always this case of like, you don't think about it, and then you get married and people are like, so when you're going to have a kid? And it's like, for me, getting married was not synonymous with having a child. I didn't know if I wanted to ever have children, but when I met my husband, I knew that I wanted to get married. And then, family planning goals changed after we got married, a year after. But before that, I never wanted to take contraception. Yeah, because I heard the horror stories, and this isn't any shade for contraception. I think the pill is amazing. I think it's like amazing that we have that medication for certain situations, but I think it's overprescribed. And then also with like barrier methods, and when we spoke before, I told you this as well, like condoms are just a lot of admin, like it's just a lot of thought that goes into it. Like you need to think about it.
I am going to put that up on my Instagram as a quote: condoms are a lot of admin.
It's just a lot of thought that goes into it. And it takes a lot of preparation and things like that. And being intimate with your partner it's not always, you don't plan it. Sometimes it's sporadic. And so I just remember like through my own research at this point, I was like, okay, so like ovulation is a thing, and this is the point where I'm fertile. So does that mean that the rest of my cycle I'm not fertile? Then I came across fertility awareness. And I taught myself, which I don't recommend because that's very dangerous, especially if you don't want to get pregnant. Very dangerous. But it worked. And I did not get pregnant for the first year of my marriage. And then when we decided to have a child, I got pregnant immediately.
Wow.
So yeah, it really does work both ways. So that's kind of how I landed up. Then when I was 6 months pregnant, this was March 2020, so pandemic, lockdown, I was actually training to be a fertility awareness teacher. Finished my training, and then 6 months postpartum, I was on a mission to bring this information to as many people as I could, mainly South Asian women, because I speak to so many South Asian women on a regular basis who don't understand their cycles, who don't know how to connect with their period, who don't know how to connect with, just, their body. And to understand your period is deep. It gives you a really deep connection with yourself, because your menstrual cycle is your body literally communicating with you through the 4 cycles, but we don't listen. So that was my mission in 6 months postpartum. I made a 6-week course, 6-module course, and it's still the exact same thing that I teach now. And I've taught, how many people have I taught? Think about 150 women since then.
Wow.
Yeah. So that is how I became the menstrual mentor.
That's incredible. And I just want to go back to the no contraception thing. I actually got put on contraception at the age of 16. I was not sexually active. In fact, I wasn't until like in my late 20s. But like, wow, should I have said that on a podcast? I don't know. Anyway, so I got put on it because I had really heavy periods, and I didn't know anything about periods. So you're right, we don't get taught, because at school it was like, here's a video in year 6, this is what sex is, and you have sex to have a baby. And then it was my mum put a book on my bed about sexual health and periods, and never spoke of it again. It was only until I was 13 years old that I remember being on the toilet, and like, it was Christmas, and I shouted down the stairs, "Mum, my bum's bleeding." Like, I thought I was dying, because I didn't know what it was. I'm a 13-year-old kid. I didn't know what it was. Like, I was like, "My bum is bleeding, I'm going to die." And that's literally the words that came out of my mouth, because I didn't know. We weren't taught. And so yeah, I'm one of these people who actually agrees with the whole no contraception thing, because at my age, I don't need any of my hormones being messed about with.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Contraception is, so like, even, it's the hormonal contraceptive is, it's in the name, it's the contraceptive, right? It is there to stop people from getting pregnant. And it's fantastic for that, because it does stop people from getting pregnant. But when it comes to having heavy periods, there should be, again, like, the system in this way is broken as well, because of patriarchy, because of other things that are put in place. Female health is, the state of female health, like reproductive health, the state of maternity services, like, it's terrible. So when you have a heavy period and you're a teenager, or any age, and you have a heavy period, first thing your doctor's going to say is go on the pill. It will regulate your cycle. And it's actually a lie, because it doesn't regulate your cycle, and you probably know that. It doesn't regulate your cycle. It's a band-aid for whatever is going on. It's like putting a plaster on like a gushing wound and just being like, let's just cover this. And then it's going to be fine. And then you take that plaster off, and the blood is still gushing out, because you haven't done the root cause. But so many women go through that same thing.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So I want to go into kind of cultural barriers, really, because obviously you are a woman out there. It's obvious you're a Sikhi woman out there, and you're talking about sex, you're talking about sexual health, well-being, period, cycles. Now, I can imagine for you, I might be completely wrong, it might have been completely easy, but to start this new career talking about all these things, you must have had pushback from the community around you, or people in your life, even on Instagram, people reaching out and going, "Why are you talking about this kind of stuff? We don't talk about this." I mean, can you maybe take us through that journey that you had, if you have?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've literally never felt any pushback from my community. Like, most of my clients are actually Amritari Sikh women. And I think it's because they relate to me. And like, who else? If I was in, a position where I didn't understand this, I would want someone who looks like me. I wouldn't want to go to a white woman, personally. That's just me, because I would want someone who understands like what my life experience is. Do you know what I mean? Someone who's like kind of walked in my shoes and understands like just how I would want to be taught. And I think that's the reason that hasn't happened. It's not by chance, because if I just started talking about sex openly on Instagram and I was just like, if I said that thing about condoms, for example, I would never talk about my personal sexual life on Instagram, right? Because that's no one's business.
No.
In these situations, in client situations, obviously I'll share my story, but it's intentional the way that I speak about it. So I think in that way, it's not scary for people, because I'm not saying, I'm just not saying anything for, how do you, like, when people use buzzwords or what's it called, like very reactionary things. I'm not saying clickbaity things. That's the word I'm trying to say. So I'm not saying clickbaity things. I'm just saying very intentional and meaningful with the content that I put out. So like, yeah, the community has been fantastic. Like the biggest support system that I've had, like very encouraging. I get messages on like a weekly basis, just like, thank you for your work. And yeah, like I said, I don't think that's by chance. It's very intentional.
What about from our male counterparts? Anything from them, or do they just completely ignore this whole situation?
No, they don't ignore it. So it is, so often I teach couples.
Okay.
So usually the woman gets in touch and I will say, okay, so do you have a partner? Like, let's get involved. And it's always a bit like, I don't know if he's going to be, and I'm just like, get him to come to the first session for 10 minutes. That's all I ask. 10 minutes. If he doesn't like it, he can go. But when you do natural family planning and you are in a partnership, one of the benefits of it is that the fertility is afforded to both people. The burden doesn't just fall on the woman's shoulders, right? And that's one of the really important things. So having your partner there to understand. By like the second or third session, the male is usually the one like, oh yeah, she did this on her chart and I can see when she's ovulating. Like they get it because the chart is very analytical. Yeah. And like they can see, they can do the analysis a lot quicker than the women. So it's so important to have that. And then the support, you open up that communication gateway to talk about your emotions, to talk about sex, to talk about intimacy in a very different way. Whereas if that woman was just taking the pill, it would just be her. And she just take that pill every day and just crack on, right? But this is a really joint thing. And then as their family planning intentions may change, that communication is going to be there because they're on the same page. Yeah. So it's hit and miss, but I'll say 80% of the time, 8 out of 10 men will do the whole 6-week course. The 2 out of 10 are kind of like, oh, okay, don't really need to know it.
Just let my woman get on with it.
Yeah. Or maybe that might just be in the sessions. Maybe when they go away, they're into it. But
I think that's amazing that actually when it comes to family planning and the couples that you're working with, they're actually doing it together. And there is a lot of science behind it. So let's go into the science, shall we?
Yes.
Obviously as a PT, I know all about the luteal and the follicular and all these phases. Why don't you explain to our listeners about the phases of the cycle and kind of where you're safe and where you're not in terms of getting pregnant?
Yeah, so there's 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. So biological terms is your menstrual phase where you bleed in, follicular phase after your bleed, ovulatory phase, and then your luteal phase. So those are the 4 phases. I like to explain this, especially for listeners who may not really understand, like, you probably heard those words, but you might not understand like the order which they go in. So I'll explain it in seasons because it's a bit easier. So your period is your inner winter. Then it goes into your inner spring, which is your follicular phase. Your ovulatory phase is your summer, and your luteal phase is your autumn. And that really, it coincides with the worldly seasons, right?
So when you're on
your period, it does. When you're on your period, you're in a winter, when you think about winter, what do animals do? They hibernate, they go inward. They chill, they sleep, they gather food, and they rest. And that is the energy that you're going to be harnessing when you are bleeding. So that's your period. When you enter your follicular phase, spring, what happens in spring? Blossom starts to show, the weather gets a little bit nicer, the sun starts to come out, and you kind of come out of your hibernation and you start to get a bit more energy because your estrogen is slightly rising. So when you're on your period, estrogen and progesterone, which are the your reproductive hormones, they're low. So that means that your energy is going to be a bit low. And as the estrogen starts to creep up, so does your energy. So your follicular phase, you're starting to feel a little bit better, a little bit more energy. You'll probably, be a bit more motivated to do things. Then you come into ovulation, which is the inner summer. When you think about summer, you think about happiness. You think about being really social and high vibes, high energy. It's a very young kind of, like in terms of yin and yang energy in traditional Chinese medicine, they will say that ovulatory time is your young energy. It's strong, it's vibrant, it's confident. And that is when you're ovulating. That is when naturally you are kind of going to want to have sex a little bit more because biologically that is what is going on. You're fertile. So that is your fertile time. And then that is when your estrogen is at its peak. After ovulation, your estrogen comes crashing down really quick. And at the same time as that's crashing down, your progesterone goes shooting up. So you have this moment in your cycle, which is really, really important. This moment, how can I explain it? Sorry, I'm looking at the baby on the monitor as well. So that's why I keep
No worries.
So you have this moment in your cycle where your estrogen has shot down and your progesterone has shot up. That is a lot going on with hormones, right? Like the hormones to shoot up like in such a big, rapid way. And you almost feel like,
no, right. So you're actually in a very strong phase at that point as well. A lot more kind of masculine hormones, right? Is that right? Yeah.
Not masculine hormones, but it is a strong, it's a strong time, like because of all that stuff going on. So it's kind of like if you like the rug's been pulled up under your feet and you're just trying to find stability.
Okay.
And because your hormones are doing so much, you're just trying to find stability. And that is where if we can't find the stability, this is where PMS comes in. So your luteal phase is actually the longest phase of your cycle. So if you do have PMS, it's going to be lasting most of your cycle. And that is why addressing things in your period, follicular, and ovulatory phase is really important, because there is a cyclical knock-on effect as well. If you do not look after yourself in these phases, your luteal phase is going to suck. It's going to be crap because that kind of rapid hormonal change, a lot on the body. So if we're not nurturing ourselves before, it's too late to be like, okay, I'm gonna do the nurturing now. It needs to be consistent throughout the cycle, not just when you're feeling bad. So hopefully that made sense for the full phase.
So let's talk about kind of the menstruation phase and the follicular phase. So you're saying you need to look after yourself before you go into the luteal phase, obviously ovulation in the middle. Can you give us tips on how to look after ourselves in those phases?
Definitely. So one of the biggest pushbacks that I get, especially from South Asian women, because we don't believe that we are deserving of looking after ourselves, is that I don't have time or I don't have the money to do it, right? It's always that battle. So I would give really simple things, because if you don't have time or money, you can still look after yourself. You can. Yeah. If you have a 9-to-5 job, I get it, like it is a lot, especially if we're working from home, that boundary of like work, it doesn't usually exist, and you can be working late and it can get a bit much. Even if you are in that situation where you're working really late and you've got all this stuff, you can literally get a bucket of water, hot water, put some lavender essential oil and some Epsom salt, which is available in so many places, right? And you can stick your feet in there for 10 minutes whilst you do some deep breathing in the dark and go to sleep. You could even do that at 9:30, 10:30 at night, go to sleep at 11, yeah? Like if that is your routine. The more, like, you asked me that question of being unlimited. Yeah. This is one of the things of being unlimited, not getting in your own way, because that is one of the things that people always get in their own way about. It's like, I don't have enough time to look after myself, but you do, because you don't need to spend money or go outside to look after yourself. It can happen right here. If you start making 10 minutes a day, everyone has a phone, everyone has the internet. You could do a 10-minute yoga flow on YouTube. Yeah, you don't need to book a yoga class. You can just do it in your PJs or, so that's the first thing, either 10 minutes on yoga, on YouTube, doing a yoga flow. Sticking your feet in a hot bucket of water with some Epsom salts and lavender. And then the other thing is just doing some deep breathing. So hypnobirthing breathing is what I always recommend. So in through the nose for 4, out through the mouth for 8. It basically slows your heart rate down. It reduces adrenaline in the body and it increases oxytocin in the body. So when oxytocin is present, adrenaline cannot be present. So you're not going to be in fight or flight. You're going to be in that relaxed, loving state, and you'll have fantastic sleep. So there's lots of different things that you can do without spending money or leaving the house to look after yourself.
And then in terms of the ovulation and the luteal phase, obviously we, when I have I'm literally in, what phase am I in right now? I don't even know. I think I'm approaching the ovulation, but I think I'm in follicular phase, because I've got a lot of energy and I'm just like, right, okay, I feel
ready to go.
Yeah, like ready to do stuff, ready to move. I just had my period a week ago, so I must be approaching that now. So like, what kind of things, obviously we forget, especially in that phase when we're just go, we forget. So what can you do, what can you like give as a self-care practice, because maybe I don't want to put my feet in a bucket of water when I'm all go is there anything else you can kind of suggest as a self-care practice in that phase where you've got all this energy?
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about the ovulatory phase is that, yeah, you do have all that energy. Like I said about the cyclical knock-on effect, if you are looking after yourself when you're bleeding, when you're in that kind of follicular phase, that will have a knock-on effect on your ovulatory phase. So you will feel better and you will actually just be able to go. Like a lot of people find that they don't need self-care then. But if you do look after yourself in the phases prior to that, your luteal phase will be a bit easier. Also, I don't know if there's any, I don't know like what your audience is like, if they're business owners or if they're like, if they kind of work,
A bit of everything. Yeah.
Everything. So if you have the ability to like schedule networking or, things like, or, recording podcasts around your ovulatory phase, because your estrogen is high, you are going to literally be, you won't even be able to, you can't even control it. You will be oozing out confidence. You will be oozing out like, you're social, you're bright, you will be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and that will come across. So if you do have the ability to kind of schedule your networking and stuff around that time, that's also better than scheduling it when you're on your period. You can do it. It just takes a little bit more preparation on your part to like give yourself the space. My little one has just woken up, so I'm just gonna go grab the baby.
I'm gonna pause. Okay, cool. So Juspreet has just gone and got her baby. He's just woken up, but we're going to go into the last phase of the cycle. So the bleeding phase, the menstruation phase. How would you suggest somebody looks after themselves then? Because I know that when I'm in this phase, all I want to do is eat. I want to eat. I want to sit on the sofa and I just want chocolate. But I also know that this is not the right phase to do that in.
So you said the menstruation phase, yeah. So it's so interesting when you're menstruating and also during the luteal phase, you're actually going to need more calories. So that is where the wanting more, the resting and wanting more, because your body's doing so much. Those hormonal changes, you're bleeding when you're on your period and just before your luteal phase, those rapid hormonal changes that we spoke about, takes a lot of energy from you. And that is where, when I spoke about patriarchy, when we look at things like intermittent fasting, when we look at things like, low carb diets, they don't actually work for us, because the only time that we'll be able to do that stuff is maybe during the ovulatory phase when we have high energy and we can deal with like a calorie deficit. The rest of the time, it's actually quite detrimental for our hormones to do that kind of stuff. And you must know this as a PT as well, right? Like if women are, doing low carb, like for extended periods of time or intermittent fasting, it messes with their hormones. You can, have things like, sorry, just grunting away. You can have things like amenorrhea where your period completely disappears because you're not fueling yourself enough. So there's not enough energy to kind of facilitate all of those hormonal changes. So when you're on your period, noticing those things of like you feel more hungry and you want to rest more, and maybe try and see like what other snacks you can have. Like I would always say to eat chocolate when you're on your period. Maybe there's some other things that you can have that kind of satiate you. Definitely eating enough protein and fats is really important, because they are going to satiate you, and they're going to, fats are so good for these hormonal changes that we go through. So not depriving yourself of those whole foods, but not depriving yourself of the chocolate either, but being mindful of having a balance, right? Still looking after yourself. So having a breakfast of, protein, fats and fiber is going to really help during this time as well. And then have the chocolate a little bit later in the day, maybe with like a cup of milk. So you've still got, you're not having that big blood sugar rush, which is also make you feel a little bit crap.
Incredible. And also I find that actually in that phase, the luteal phase, I just think walking and grounding myself outside is the best form of exercise. Like I know I'm not going to be able to lift very heavy, so I kind of forgo that and maybe just do the cardio and stuff like that. Would you agree that that would be the right kind of exercise to do when you're in that phase?
Definitely. When you're, in that luteal phase, especially if you've got PMS, like, you want to ground because, you're just trying to, you just want some stability. So really grounding, meditation, and just trying to center yourself is really important. And it sets you up for a lovely period as well.
Awesome. Well, I like that we've led into the kind of meditation part and a bit more spiritual part. So I'm going to ask you, is there now I believe there is, but is there a correlation between the moon and our periods?
Definitely. Yeah, there definitely is. The moon does affect us, right? it definitely affects our period. Some people have start their periods with the new moon. Some people start their periods, so sometimes it's with the lunar cycle, sometimes they're ovulating in the lunar cycle. So it definitely has, obviously there's no like formal research, right? But I also believe that it definitely does have an effect. Right, I'm just going to feed this.
Okay, no worries. Are you okay to keep talking?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, no, I completely believe that. In terms of me, my cycle obviously varies. Now there are 13 lunar cycles in the year, and I believe we get 13 periods as well, because we're not on a 30-day cycle, right? Most of us.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it depends on your cycle length, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'm definitely right now, obviously new moon, and I am approaching the ovulation phase. Yeah. And then on my full moon, and this is very apparent in terms of my mood as well. On the full moon, the week after the full moon, I was like, oh, everything sucks. So yeah, definitely there's definitely a kind of a correlation.
So do you ovulate with the new moon?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then when you enter, so after the new moon, you enter your luteal phase, that PMS kind of phase.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, but actually right now I'm in a really good phase, so it must be ovulation, right? Because I feel really energized this morning. I know there's full moon tonight. I thought it was yesterday. And I've done my workout. I've been for a walk. I've got you as a podcast. You know what I mean? I've got a lot of things going on today. So I just feel like I'm like little Duracell, not
Yes. Little Duracell battery.
That's
you
the one.
The energy. That's it.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so let's talk about kind of how would someone start monitoring their cycle, whether they want to get pregnant or not? Like, at what point in the cycle do you start your monitoring? And just if you can just walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, do you know what? Listen, I just got to say, all these questions that you're asking are so good, but this is probably my favorite question so far.
Okay.
Monitoring your cycle it's actually a lot of fun. Like I was saying, your menstrual cycle in its entirety, so not just the bleed, the whole menstrual cycle is literally communicating with you. It is talking to you here. Back on now because I've kind of positioned it. It's literally body communicating with you. So one thing that I always suggest to people, if you want to start with your period and just note down when your period comes, but don't stop there and don't assume that you're going to know when your next period is going to come just because of when that started. Then start looking at your cervical fluid. And this is something that people are just like cervical fluid, what is that? I get it again.
I mean, you saw my face then. I was like,
The patriarchy, right? We internalize patriarchy as well, and we find our genitals and our reproductive biology disgusting, and it's fine. It's ingrained in us, right? And we have to do that unlearning.
Before you continue, do you think that's the patriarchy, or do you think that's a cultural thing as well for us being Asian?
Yeah, it's like the patriarchy in being Asian as well. Definitely, it's a patriarchal thing. Not enjoying what understanding your body. It goes across all cultures, right? But smashing that patriarchy and just being like, I'm gonna start observing my cervical fluid, because whenever I start talking about cervical fluid, people's faces are exactly like common reaction, and I totally get it, because mine was the same, and I had to do a lot of unlearning to be like, no, this is actually really important and it's really normal. A lot of people firstly describe cervical fluid as discharge, but discharge is something that is associated with infection. So we're not talking about things with infection. That's something completely different. Cervical fluid is to do completely with your fertility. It's an indicator of fertility, but also it's an indicator of good health. So again, this isn't just for if you want to get pregnant. If you have a period, you should start observing this stuff, because it's telling you that you're ovulating and that your hormones are doing what they're supposed to do. Because if you have a period, it doesn't mean you're ovulating. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're cycling. Basically, you can have anovulatory bleeds. So if you start to get to know your cervical fluid, you're going to be like, okay, I'm ovulating, my hormones are doing what they got to do. Cool. So going back to the tracking your period and kind of observing what kind of color is it? How much is there? Is there, can you see cervical fluid in the blood, or is it just blood? Is it quite dark blood? Is it light blood? Is it clotty? Actually analyzing your blood and being like, okay, this is what it looks like, right? Just on the pad, or if you use a cup, whatever. Don't need to touch it. You don't need to do anything like that. Just having a look, right? And then also noticing the different sensations at your vulva, right? So
Yeah.
throughout the cycle, you are going to go through different sensations where you're going to feel your period bleed, and then you're probably going to feel a bit dry, and then you're going to have a different sensation as you approach ovulation, where it's going to be like, oh, okay, I can feel my cervical fluid coming in now. What does that feel? What does it feel like? Yeah, because that feeling is also going to change, and it's different for everyone. And then at that point as well, you're going to be seeing, if you're feeling cervical fluid, you're probably going to see something as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just
That's
hearing
all
little dinosaur noises. You're probably going to see something too. So even in terms of observation, again, you don't need to, touch anything. Just when you go for a wee, after you wipe on the tissue, you're probably going to see a little something, right? And just have a look. What does it look like? Does it look like lotion? Does it look like egg whites? What does it look like? And even that's going to tell you a lot about where you're at in your ovulatory phase.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so on ovulation, it doesn't happen like clockwork. It's not, a regular thing, because it's affected by our environment, it's affected by stress, it's affected by food, sleep, travel, all of this stuff. So getting to know how to track it in real time, or just observe it in real time, is super important.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what we're here for. So, if I wasn't ovulating and I had a period, would I know?
Not unless you're tracking your cycle and you understand your body, right? Because if you're bleeding, a lot of people will just assume, oh yeah, like my cycle must be fine, right?
Yeah.
But there can be situations where you have an anovulatory cycle, but your uterus still grows, and still sheds at certain times. But
interesting.
yeah.
Okay. And what would you recommend as one of the best forms of, say, period collection? And I'm only asking because I noticed that when I started using cups, the pain went away. When I used to use tampons, I still do sometimes when I'm lazy, because I find cups a bit of effort, actually.
Admin.
Admin again. But like when I used tampons, like I get cramps in my vagina, right? But when I started using cups, and they were really heavy and clotty, and when I started using the moon cup or whatever diva cup or whatever, I find that actually I get less cramps and less clotting. Have you come across this in your line of work in terms of period collection forms?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a question for you. What tampons were you using?
Tampax.
Yeah, so that is a really interesting one. So one of the modules in the course that I teach is about period products. And people often assume that I'm going to say, okay, yeah, just use like period undies or you use a cup, but it's not that. I'm just exploring what people use and how that correlates to their pain. And what I've found, and what a lot of my peers have also found, is that when you're using things like commercial kind of pads and tampons, there's a lot more pain because of the ingredients that's in them. So with like, things like don't know if I can say the brand names, I won't, but just okay, like you said, Tampax, right? A very well-known brand. Other well-known brands of like, pads, like the ones that we've all grown up using. When you pick up a packet of Always, for example, Ish.
Yeah.
Can you smell anything?
I smell a bit chemically.
And like, can you they smell like fragrance and like perfume,
perfume,
perfume, right? So like those are the kind of things that they're putting onto these, and in tampons is inorganic cotton, and dioxins and like other ingredients like that, right? But the law states that you don't actually have to put any of these ingredients on the side of the tampon or on the side of the period pad, because it just doesn't matter. Women don't need to know, right? But these are the kind of things that once they're going in such an exposed place in your body, such a delicate space, that it can cause period pain. Yeah, definitely. So that's probably why you've noticed that difference in the cup, which is amazing, because the cup is just BPA free plastic, right? It's just that there's nothing else, but those things do cause pain. And after 10-15 years of, the body has a high tolerance to like chemicals and toxins, right? After 10-15 years of using this stuff, it could have, more of an effect, maybe heavier periods, maybe lighter periods. So I always say to people, just in terms of period collection, have a look at, you can get organic pads, that are cotton, You can get organic tampons or cups or period undies. Just explore your options, basically. Use what works best for you.
Yeah, 100%. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I'm definitely a tampon girl at the moment. I can't handle pads. Like it just feels wet out there, you know, wet out there.
Sure.
So I'm just like a no. I had a really interesting question that came into my head, but it's completely gone. But actually, what we talked about last week before we did this podcast was generationally, you said you were talking to your nanny, and the way she talks about periods and things is very different. And you were talking about kind of pre-colonization of India. Can you please go into that a little bit in terms of what you mean by that, and what the difference is between, say, your mum and your nanny, and how they talk about it? Because obviously your mum was born in a time where India had been colonized already, or was going through colonization, right? That would be really interesting for us, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So my nanny was born in pre-colonial Punjab, and the British went to Punjab when she was about, I think, 10 or 11. Like, she remembers when they came. Like, yeah, she literally remembers. She tells me stories. So she had already, like, you know, her formative years had already kind of happened. So she kind of was living in that indigenous Punjabi culture. And the way that she speaks about periods, so open. The way that she speaks about, you know, lots of things. Like, she doesn't wear a bra. And I think that's fantastic. And I was just like, I don't want to wear a bra either. Like, this is great. And she just speaks about things very openly, which is nice. And I was able to talk to her about, when I got pregnant, I was able to talk to her about birth. Because I was just like, it doesn't, you know, a medicalized birth didn't make sense to me, especially as a low risk woman, right? You know, with birth, and we're going off track a little bit, but I will come back. With birth, I love this quote that my friend Kemi always says, Kemi Johnson. She always says that birth is a natural thing that occasionally needs medical attention, and not a medical event that occasionally happens naturally. And that is why I spoke to her, like, because she gave birth. You know, home birth was a normal thing 1 generation ago, right? Like, and you know, but anyway, so that's my nanny kind of speaks like that. Whereas my mom, who was kind of born and raised in colonial Punjab, and then also came to this country when she was quite young, her view on that kind of stuff is that she doesn't speak about it. So whenever, you know, it's really easy for us to say, and, you know, I've said it before as well, like, you know, oh, Asians are so backwards, you know, we don't speak about anything. We're so, like, sheltered and, like, everything's disgusting, but it's not actually our way of thinking, right? It's a colonial way of thinking. It's the British way of thinking. Conservative kind of British way of thinking is you don't speak about, you know, you don't speak about sex, you don't speak about periods, you don't speak about this kind of stuff. But we come, and I said this to you before, we come from a place of the world where the Kama Sutra was created, right? So how can we find sex weird, if that makes sense?
Yeah. And tantra, right? It's just about learning your body and your partner's body, and from a very deep spiritual place more than anything. So it's interesting, because something that I've noticed in general, whether it's periods or sex or whatever, Ayurveda, whatever, is the Western world has taken an Eastern concept, like, say, like America, etc., and made money out of it, and brought it to the rest of us. And it's interesting how, say, we've maybe gone a bit, like, you know, or because of the colonization or whatever, that we don't talk about it, but now the Western world is teaching us about our own, you know, heritage in certain ways. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So the like colonization as a project, the entire thing was to, in all the colonies, was to go to a community and rip everything from it, right? Like, in for example, for First Nations peoples, they cut their hair. Yeah, they did the same to Sikh people. They cut their hair because your hair is a deeply spiritual thing. They cut their hair, they put them in English clothes, and they put them in English Catholic schools, right? Once you separate someone from a language, from their indigenous language, you change the way that they think about things. Because the way that we, like, different languages create different cultural, you know, French people are a lot different to English people, right? Italians are a lot different to English people. Their language is a part of that. Once you start to think in a certain language, those cultural kind of conditions are also within you, because that language is the way that it is, right? Like, if you learn to speak English as your first language, you will adopt English ways of being. So that is what they did. They made us adopt English ways of being, and in that
they anglicized us, didn't they? Sorry, someone's trying to call me. 1 second.
I know.
Okay, done. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that is like the a condition of colonization as a project. That is what they wanted to do. And do you know what? I actually forgot what your question was. I'm trying to make the point.
Oh, I was talking about how the Western world has taken something that
Oh,
say
yes.
go on.
So that is so a condition of colonization is that they strip us of that knowledge and make us believe that we have nothing and we need them. Yeah, we don't have anything. We need them to go to school. We need them to learn. We are barbaric and they are going to help us to become proper people. So then that happened. We lost a lot of our culture. All the colonies lost a lot of their culture, right?
Yeah,
and now what the West done? They've got yoga, they've got Ayurveda, they're eating clarified butter, they're making ghee,
and they're feeding it back to us now, right? Like this is the way of life.
Here's a recipe book. You know what? There was in Essex near my parents' house, there was an Indian restaurant that opened. And the marketing was just going hard, right? So I was seeing it on my Instagram all the time. I was like, oh wow, okay, got to check this place out. I clicked on it and I was just like, who owns this place? Because I just like to know, if there's if there's a Mexican restaurant, I would like to know who owns it, right? And it was a white couple, and I was like, yeah, you guys are making Indian, I just find that crazy. Everyone's got hustle, no shade, but it's just crazy, isn't it? Like, they literally
Well, I remember my dad talking about when he came into this country and they would say things like, P word, go home, back to your country. That's how they were treated. And he had a lot of racism because he was up in Preston and Bradford when he came to this country from Africa, in India, like where he was normal. And he was saying that people used to say, go home, you curry smelling this, that, and the other, right? And now it is the number one dish in the UK.
Yeah.
The tandoori or the balti.
Yeah, whatever the hell whatever they've called it. Yeah.
Whatever these things are. Your sabji. That is the
sabji dal roti,
yeah, exactly.
100%.
Number one dish in the UK. They said there's that joke, isn't there, about being British, wearing German shoes, driving Japanese cars, eating Indian food. That makes you British. Exactly. That makes you British. All right, we are gonna end this soon, wrap this up soon. I just want I want to know about something, actually. It's really interesting. So I'm in this process of starting this whole womb healing because I've had a lot of trauma down there previously through sexual assault, and I'm going through this womb healing process, and I've just bought myself a yoni steaming kit with yoni steaming herbs. And two of the reasons I bought this is because supposedly, well, it is true, the throat and the vagina are exactly the same kind of consistency in terms of what they look like, what they feel like, and the kind of, I don't know, the inside of it is similar kind of consistency is what I've heard. And I've been experiencing a lot of reflux recently again.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm going to go and, hopefully my kit arrives this week, and I'm going to steam my yoni before I go to Bali next week. So what are your thoughts on kind of womb healing? Because obviously I know you come from a scientific kind of background, but this is, I guess, more of a spiritual and science combined background. What were your thoughts on that?
So important. I love that you brought this up. So the vocal cords and your vagina, they are connected. So even in birth, right? So one of the mechanisms of birth is the more relaxed you are. And this is why I said birth is a natural event that occasionally needs medical intervention, because the more relaxed you are, the more birth just happens. One of the techniques that I teach women to use in birth is to, if you breathe like that, your birth canal, which is the vagina, relaxes, because once your throat relaxes, if you have there's a doula that calls it this, floppy face, floppy fanny.
I love that. Okay.
I can't remember what she's called, but she's on Instagram. But yeah, she floppy face, floppy fanny. If you breathe, if you relax your throat, the baby will make their way down the birth a lot easier because you're not tense, right? And because your throat, like you were saying, your throat is connected to your vagina. So it's crazy that you're experiencing that reflux. And with your yoni steaming kit, have you got not a birth stool, but a steaming stool?
Yeah.
That's wicked. That is amazing. And what herbs are coming with it?
Oh, I can't remember, but I know there was rose in there, lavender, and loads of other things. I can't remember. I'll have a look and I'll send it to you later. But I'm really excited. I've been thinking about it for a while. but it was a conversation I had last week in terms of my throat and why I can't seem to speak my truth sometimes, why the reflux is there, and obviously there's a lot of tension. And I know it scientifically it's coming from my gut, right? But actually there's definitely the vagina throat connection.
Absolutely. And even when we talk about spiritual practices, to me they are scientific.
Yeah.
Because the proof is like, okay, it might be anecdotal, there might not be scientific, like someone's in a lab doing these studies or like whatever formalized studies, but like for years, for generations, people have been yoni steaming, people have known that there's a connection. So that's science, right? Again, it's another condition of colonization.
I was about to say
knowledge, yeah.
It's the West feeding us back what we did anyway, right?
Exactly. Why are you steamed? Yeah. No, but that's really cool. I'm really excited for you.
Thank you. So what is one tip that maybe you can give today to our listeners in terms of getting to understand their cycle and moving forward, whichever way they want to go with family planning? What's the one tip you can give them today?
Know that your hormones fluctuate throughout your cycle. You are not a man and you will not be able to function like one. So don't compare yourself to Dave at the office who goes to the gym every day at 5 a.m. because you might not be able to do that when you're on your period or when you're in your luteal phase, and that's fine. Figure out what works for you and actually sit and listen to your body. What do you need? Do you need a bit more rest? Do you need to go to sleep earlier? Do it. Just listen to yourself and don't compare yourself to men, because men's hormones in a day, in a 24-hour cycle, is what they run in. Testosterone rises at about 4 5 a.m., stays risen and dips at about 6. And it's actually at its highest at about 4 o'clock. So what time does happy hour usually start in the city? 4 till 6. Yeah.
Sorry. It made me laugh because you're like, rises at 5 a.m. Okay, so that's morning glory. 4 o'clock. Okay, they go drinking, and then in the evening.
But that's like the world. Again, patriarchy, the world is designed for men to thrive, and we try and fit ourselves into that, but it doesn't work. We don't run on a 24-hour cycle. My husband can wake up at 5 a.m. every single day, Monday to Sunday, every single day of the month. Yeah, every single day he can wake up at 5. He works out and then he goes to work for 7 8 o'clock. Yeah, and then he's got high energy until about 6 o'clock. I can only do that kind of stuff when I'm ovulating because I've got that high estrogen. When I'm on period, I can't do that. But I've tried so much, like in the past, because I didn't understand my cycle and I didn't listen to my body. I tried to hold myself up to these expectations of like a body that is not mine. So that would be the one tip moving forward, regardless of, if you're sexually active, if you're not, if you want kids or don't. If you have a menstrual cycle, listen to your body and allow your hormones to ebb and flow, and don't be too hard on yourself if sometimes you need a bit more rest or you can't go to the gym every day.
I love that. So just listen to your body, and that is it, simply it. Juspreet, you are a modern day medicine woman. I have to say, you really are. I love what you're doing. I love what you're about. I'm so glad we connected. And it's really funny that we only connected when I started my new Instagram page.
I know.
It's crazy.
I know, literally.
It's madness. I feel like I've known you for a while, and thank you for today. I can definitely see a follow-up happening at some point in the future. But if people want to get hold of you, can you let us know how they do? If they want to work with you in terms of family planning, how do they get hold of you on the socials and all that jazz?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm at menstrual mentor _ and drop me a DM, connect with me, let me know where you're at in your family planning or like with understanding your cycle. And I can send you, we can talk about how we can work together, or just hit the link in my bio. All the courses and stuff is there as well.
Amazing. And Juspreet obviously is proof that you can have a baby when you want a baby using natural contraception of just monitoring your cycle. Guys, thank you very much for listening. Juspreet, thank you very much for being here. You can obviously follow me at Unlimited Urvashi or on browngirl.rising, and I'll put all the links in the show notes, and we will be back next week with another podcast. See you later.